guests now, Mr. Mike Martin and Mr. Bill Green, who will be back here shortly. They are both members of the Vietnam Veterans of Diablo Valley, and they are head of the Speakers Bureau. They go around to high schools and colleges talking about their experiences in the war. We've been very fortunate here at Las Positas. I have had them to every one of my History 8 courses. They've also helped us to put on a number of programs for the larger campus throughout the years. So I'm very grateful to them. A couple things you will need to know for your note-taking and for exam purposes. You'll need to be able to identify each of these men, their branch of service, what their job was in country, and what their experience was like when they returned home. And so be able to identify both of them, their branch of the service, what they did in country, their jobs in country, and what their experience was like when they returned home. They're also very open to your questions, so they each will go through their own experience. They will share some general information with you about the Vietnam War, and at the end of their presentation, they will be happy to answer your questions. And if you don't have questions, trust me, they will have questions for you. Okay, so please give them your undivided attention and a round of applause to greet them.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Mike Martin. I am a United States Navy Vietnam veteran, and I'll go through more on that in just a little bit. Anybody here in the room seen us before at any of the high schools? What high school?
Cal High.
Cal?
Dublin.
Dublin?
Amador.
Amador? Okay, so great. So you're not going to hear too much more, so you should be able to be good on your note taking. Vietnam, Bill will be back in the room in just a few minutes, and he is a United States Army Vietnam veteran. Here he comes. Vietnam veterans are defined as guys that had boots on the ground in Vietnam. We were on the ground. You can go ahead and advance it to the map, Bill, the next slide. All of those veterans that were stationed on the ground somewhere in South Vietnam. And we had every branch of the service represented on the ground there. But what's interesting is that there were also Navy personnel on board ships that are considered to be Vietnam veterans. They're classified as the Blue Water Navy, and they were in close support of the troops, firing gunfire support, they called it. And there's a lot of Navy guys on board aircraft carriers were flying missions over both North and South Vietnam. There were Air Force personnel as well, stationed in Thailand, stationed in the Philippines, stationed in Guam, B-52 long-range missions. They'd get resupplied with fuel, and then they'd go bomb, and then they'd fly back home to wherever it was that they were going. So you had our Air Force and Navy that were outside the realm. But there were Coast Guard personnel there. A lot of folks asked that question, but there were Coast Guard personnel. Very briefly, I want you guys to look up at the stats up there. I'm just going to hit a few highlights. If you have a question, you can jot it down and ask me later. But you notice that the years on the conflict lasted a long time according to the official DoD records, Department of Defense records. We had personnel in South Vietnam in support of the South Vietnamese government in the 50s, in support of as things were trying to wrap up and set up the capitalism versus communism in the North. 2,594,000 American military men and women served during the dates that are noted right on the first line. Notice, ladies, that it says military women, only 7,484 military women, and that about 83% of those were nurses. Most of those were Army nurses. Number of deaths. 58,229 names were inscribed on the Vietnam Memorial Wall initially. There have been more added since. But no, look at the number of deaths. They're what we classify hostile deaths, actually died at the hands of the enemy. Non-hostile deaths happen in any combat situation. It could be something as silly as a trucking accident. It could be something like friendly fire. It could be like one of my buddies that was in a helicopter that went down, the Chinook, which was a big one. It went down and 35 young men lost their lives due to a mechanical reason, not an enemy reason. Okay? Non-hostile deaths, a lot of different deaths. 8 nurses, married men, 17,539, 61% were 21 years of age or younger. I always go like this and put my hand and said there were 5 young men that we know about that died in Vietnam, and when it got discovered, it turned out that they had forged their parents' signatures on the enlistment paperwork. They wanted to serve so badly. 4 of those 5 were 15 years old. Excuse me, 16 years old. The youngest killed in Vietnam was only 15 years old. Took some dedication, and the impact on the parents was quite dramatic. Missing in action, MIAs, you've heard that terminology before. When the conflict ended, 2,538. I have not updated this chart. One of these days I'll get around to it, but it says there, as of March 2011, there were still 1,698 still missing. That means they found over whatever that differential is, 800 and something. That many bodies have been found and identified with the forensic science that we have today. Earlier this year, there were 3 bodies that came home that had been through the cycle of being identified. And it was quite a unique situation. It turned out one of them was a Vietnam veteran. One of them was a veteran that had been MIA in Korea. And then there was a third one that they found in the jungles of New Guinea from World War II. So the project, and this project is still ongoing today in terms of identifying. And when they bring those remains home, there is quite a homecoming for those folks. POWs, there were 766, 114 died in captivity. One of the misperceptions about the Vietnam conflict is that the vast majority of those that served during the entire conflict period were drafted. Everybody's familiar with what the draft was, right? So there were a lot of people drafted, and they had the regular draft, like when Bill and I went through the system. And then later in the early, late 60s, early 70s, they changed to the lottery system. But only 25% of those that served in country in Vietnam were actually drafted. That means the vast majority of those that served during the entire conflict period were asking to go back, or they extended their tours of duty over there. Tours of duty in Vietnam were 1 year long for everybody except the Marine Corps. And I hope there's no Marines in here, because we always say the Marines had a difficult time counting. Sorry, Sarah, I saw you. Two of you? Two of you? That's why you had 13 months. The Marines had 13 months. One of our guys, I think he actually came here, Tom Fitzmaurice, he served, he did 5 tours, 5 Purple Hearts. Incredible. All right, this last page here, I just cover it, just read through it briefly. 97% of the Vietnam veterans were in fact honorably discharged. So just to make it a point. Didn't really have too many places to go if you wanted to desert while you were over there. Not like in Europe. No unit, Army, Air Force, anybody in Vietnam ever surrendered to the enemy. Not one unit. They were overrun a few times. All right, let's go on. Let's talk about Mike Martin now. Mike Martin graduated from high school on a Friday in June of 1965. I was a military brat. I've been around the United States and around the world already, following my stepdad, who was a United States Air Force officer. I graduated on that Friday. I started at the University of Arizona in summer school on Monday, and on Thursday of that week, I got my draft notice. I went down to the draft board a couple of weeks later, and I was very lucky because I was already literally, summer school is a very compressed time slot, so I was already halfway through the semester, and they said, okay, we'll let you stay. So they gave me a 2S deferment, and I got to stay in school. But they looked me square in the eye and said, you know, mister, if we call you again, you're history. So what I did was, because I knew I was healthy, I knew that I would more than likely be called again, probably within a year. I chose to volunteer, but I wanted to do it on my terms, and my terms were that I wanted to be an officer in the military, because I knew the difference. I found a program, not an ROTC program, which are programs you have at some of your four-year schools, but I found a program through a reserve center where I was allowed, it was called an ROC, or Reserve Officer Candidate Program, where they let me enlist, do the things you do as a reservist, and then as long as I got my degree, I would be sent to OCS and complete that cycle and be commissioned as an officer. That cycle did in fact complete, and on the 25th of October 1968, I was commissioned an ensign in the United States Navy. An ensign is the same as a second Louis in any of the other branches. I was also assigned at the very same time that I would become a Navy Supply Corps officer. And I received orders to go to the Navy Supply Corps School in Athens, Georgia, a 6-month school. I completed that school, which basically there they trained us on what all the different jobs were at that point in time for the enlisted Navy personnel that were going to be working for me. As it turned out, it was totally different than that. I got orders to go in country in Vietnam, and I landed after doing some initial training at the amphibious base in Coronado, California. The SEALs do some training. Got 2 weeks training there. I spent all of one day at Camp Pendleton, 45 minutes at the pistol range to learn to shoot a .45, and 45 minutes to learn how to shoot an M16. That was the extent of my weapons training prior to going to Vietnam. I landed in Da Nang, and Bill, can you point the arrow up at Da Nang? Not there. Da Nang is right there. It's the northernmost port city in South Vietnam. It was a man-made port facility that the Navy Seabees built. And that port and Cam Ranh Bay down towards the bottom there were the two port cities where all the ships, the merchant marine ships, the Navy cargo ships would come and deliver the cargo that was loaded right here in Oakland and down and out of Long Beach, and at the two weapons stations, Seal Beach Weapons Station and the Concord Naval Weapons Station when it was still open. When I arrived in Vietnam, I was assigned to the naval support activity there, which was the biggest command in Da Nang at the time, because we were a great big huge supply area to support all the troops that were out in the field. These are some pictures I'm going to run through very quickly, and then I'll tell a couple more stories. This is downtown Da Nang, and I want you just to visualize for a second. See the couple of military jeeps, and you see some motorbikes, and you see some bicycles. Visualize that it's 2016. There's no jeeps there, but they're maybe a Toyota truck or something like that. And the picture would be exactly the same except for those two vehicles. It's not changed much of an iota in many of the areas in Vietnam. Notice the cement there on that floor. That's like a little fast food joint. This is a housing unit in town. Cement floors means those properties at that point in time were owned by somebody in the upper middle class. Upper middle class. Most folks in Vietnam lived in hooches or huts. The frames were made out of bamboo. They had thatched siding, thatched roofs. Sort of, they lived out in the bush. Farmers market. Every day there's a farmers market. That's how their existence there. A couple of policemen. The heat and humidity in Vietnam is extremely hot. I arrived on July 4th. They opened the doors to the bird to prepare us to get off. All of us were dripping wet within about 2 minutes because it was about 100 degrees and it was about 100% humidity. It wasn't raining, but it was just, yucky. Shell gas station from even way back then. This is a picture of an area, and Bill, if you can show them there, up at the top where he's showing you, that's a Marine Corps ammo dump, where we used to deliver ammo to. This whole area here is called Red Beach, and part of our group went back to Vietnam a few years ago and delivered wheelchairs when we were working with the Wheelchair Foundation. They mentioned that they went by Red Beach and they said, Mike, you would never recognize that area today. Think of going on Waikiki or going to Maui and going down where the row of different resorts are, and the bungalows and the swimming pools and the golf courses and the tennis courts and all that stuff. Parts of South Vietnam now are the #1 area for resorts in all of Southeast Asia. It's a very, very big tourist business there. So capitalism is alive and well. These are pictures of some of the ships. That's a harbor patrol boat there, just making sure things are going. Back in those days, the way cargo was loaded and unloaded was using booms and winches, pulley mechanisms, those kind of things. All of that stuff, we didn't have containers back then. You go across the Bay Bridge down, you look over there to the left to the Port of Oakland, what do you see? Thousands of containers. So people put stuff in containers and ship it off. So here's some of the more, pulleys and stuff. Those are some of the trucks that I was responsible for. This is an area where we transship, this is called bridge ramps, where we transshipped ammunition. Ammo was unloaded onto barges or onto these Mike boats, little small boats that you've seen in World War II movies with the ramp in the front, landing troops on the beach. That's what those Mike boats were. We would unload ammo into them and onto barges, bring it in here, unload it, get it immediately onto semi-truck trailers. The 2 semis there with the trailers, those are all loaded with 500-pound bombs, getting ready to get out there. We would move that cargo. We would move ammo cargo only during the daytime. At nighttime, Da Nang became what they called Rocket City. The Viet Cong or the NBA would try to infiltrate with mortars and/or rockets as close as they could get. They'd come, set up, shoot. Never could target something close enough that you could walk a battery in. So every once in a while they would hit something. Here, they hit not our supply buildings, but right next door to this supply depot area was an Army of South Vietnam ammo dump. The ammo dump took a direct hit of a 122 rocket into a pallet of, we don't know what it was. But there were 10 pallets of ammo in that cell. All the pallets cooked off. The energy wave that came out of the mouth of that cell did all of this particular damage. All that damage. It was just the energy wave. No direct hit on anything. We were very blessed that night. We had no casualties at all. Very blessed. I know. Bill, you see Bill went backwards to show this picture, right? That's a very young Mike Martin there about, what, how many years ago? And how many pounds ago? I'm not going to That's a very young Mike Martin right there. I'm coming back to this slide here because I want to talk about the way that I worked my job. I worked during the day shift, getting the trucks moved and going and helping get some things unloaded. Sometimes there were paperwork snafus, just the normal kind of paperwork kind of jungle. At nighttime, since we didn't move cargo, I had a collateral duty, and every other month I would have the security detail here at Bridge Ramp. One of the things that we had to do every night was assign 2 sailors to go into a Boston whaler. A Boston whaler is a small outboard motorboat. And those two sailors would go back and they would drive about 30 yards out into the river, and their job was to drop concussion grenades in the river. Why? Because the Vietnamese would put swimmers in the water to try to blow things up with what they call satchel charges or explosive charges. They never were able to be successful in doing that the whole time I had the duty. Unfortunately, in April of 1970, at about 0300 in the morning, I heard a very massive explosion. First thing you do when you hear an explosion in Vietnam is you drop to the ground, wherever you are. Then you're looking to be in a bunker as quickly as you can be. I happened to be inside the bunker at the time. The chief and I then, after about 30 seconds, because you try to listen, if there's inbound rounds coming, you can hear them coming. They're whistling in the air. The chief and I ran out right to where that mama san is with a little hat. We were listening for the motorboat. No noises. The chief took his flashlight and actually literally ran out into the river on the cement ramp. Went as far as he could go looking for something. He did, in fact, find a piece of fiberglass about yay big. That was the only thing we found of the motorboat or the young men that were in it. The only thing that we could surmise is that the 2 young men had not followed the instructions of the way that they were supposed to do the drops, and had left the lid open on the box of concussion grenades, and something had caused them to pull the pin on the other grenade that they were holding. They hit a wake, they hit something, and a grenade released and went in the box, and the rest was history. Now that had a very deep impact on me, because those 2 young men, I was their boss. I had assigned them that duty that day. I ended up having to be the officer because I was their division officer or their company commander. I had to write home the letter to the parents. It was a very, very, very difficult situation for me to deal with. I was only 23 years old when that happened. And I still think about that every once in a while, even today. And I've had to deal with it. It's part of my PTSD stuff. The last quick story. All of us that were in Vietnam got to go on R&R, rest and recuperation time. We could pick a number of different places to go to, from Hawaii, Japan, the Philippines, Hong Kong, Australia, and Thailand. I did some research, and being 23 and young and dumb, I said, and single. The most important operative word, single. I chose to go to Sydney, Australia. Sydney in February is summertime down there. So I read all this wonderful stuff about the beautiful beaches and the beautiful women and et cetera, et cetera. So all of us that got on the airplane to go down to Sydney, we were all yelling and cheering and clapping. So all the guys that I got back on the airplane when I came home told me that I had a very, very good time. Well, this got a sharp group here.
You know, Mike, with all the pictures you bring of Vietnam, we don't ever see any pictures of Australia.
And you never will. Bill is alluding to the fact that about 10 or 15 years after I came home, I in fact did find a roll of 35mm film, because that's what we had back in those days. And I opened it up and I looked at it and went, oh my sweet Jesus. I rolled it back up, put it back in the little canister, and it sits at the, in my, what do you call it?
Safety deposit.
Safety deposit box thing. And it's staying there under lock and key. In fact, I think I lost the key. So, those are stories that, thank you, Bill. I don't remember. So, but what I saw said I had a good time. Now, I'll tell you the last bit that I have to say, because one of the key points that we try to get across is how were we treated when we came home? So I came home, and actually because I was scheduled to arrive on the 4th of July, 1970. And I was one of the, what I call the unlucky ones, because I ended up landing at a commercial airport. Most of the guys arrived at military bases like Travis Air Force Base, right up here in Fairfield, at McCord up in the greater San Norton used to take some people in down in San Bernardino. I landed at LAX. LAX, remember the airports back in those days, we didn't have TSA like you got today. People could actually go clear up to the gates and see people coming off at the gates. 200 plus guys are yelling and cheering, we're home, they're ready to go, get out of those airplanes, they're ready to have a nice cold beer, to maybe see their wife or their girlfriend or whatever. We get out and we walk into the middle of a war protest. There was probably 200 young people dressed in their hippie garb of the day, and it was pretty brutal. Anyway, a young lady, because I did have my officer insignias on, she grabbed me, not literally, but came up and got right in my face. Started calling me everything in the book. She called me a baby killer, and then she spit in my face. Now, do you think maybe I wanted to cold conquer? You betcha I did. But I'd also been told that, if you choose to do what other young men have done when this situation has occurred, you will pay the consequence of doing that. So I had to turn the cheek and walk away. Luckily, I found a bar real quick, and I got somebody to buy me a beer. And then I got the heck out of there. It was not a good situation. And all I could say is, veterans have been fighting wars to preserve the freedoms we get to enjoy in this country. One of those is the freedom of speech. The thing is, you got to remember and understand what is it that you're protesting against. This young lady didn't know me from Adam, but she called me a baby killer. I was in Vietnam for 366 days and never pulled the trigger once on any weapon. Just wasn't in a position to do that. It's okay if they protest against the war. Don't protest against the warriors who are only doing their jobs. Thanks, folks. Bill Green, United States Army.
So 2 more terms I forgot to mention that you need to know are PTSD and Agent Orange. They'll both go over them with you, but I just want to make sure you know that. I'll take any seconds away from you.
Good morning. My name is Bill Green. I'm the president of the Vietnam Vets of Diablo Valley. This is Veterans Week. That's why I got all the garb on this. How many veterans do we have in the audience? 1, 2, and both you Marines. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
I'm surprised you're sober. Okay, May of 1967, I went down to enlist in the United States Army, Airborne Special Forces, and I was refused enlistment because I checked a box that said I had asthma, and they told me an asthmatic couldn't survive in Vietnam, therefore my services were not required. That was May of 1967. July of 67, I got my draft notice. Okay. And in August of 67, I was in basic training in a place called Fort Bliss, Texas. That's a hell of an oxymoron. Trust me when I tell you there is nothing bliss in Southwest Texas in the month of August. When I got there, once again, immediately I volunteered, infantry airborne. Why? Because this is what I wanted to do. Unlike today's military, which outsources a whole lot of jobs. 1967, any civilian job you could find it in the Army. They didn't outsource anything. They had plenty of soldiers with the draft. They had any job you wanted. I didn't want any of those jobs. I didn't want to be a truck driver, I didn't want to be a cook, I didn't want to be a clerk. I didn't want any of those other jobs that they had. What I wanted is, give me a gun, let me fight. I wanted to be a real soldier. They granted my wish at the end of my infantry training. I landed in Vietnam on the 13th of January, 1968, 2 weeks before the Tet Offensive. When I got there, I had had extensive training in both booby traps and map reading. And when I was assigned to the 198th Light Infantry, 3rd Squad, 3rd Platoon, Company A, my AO, I was in the northern section of South Vietnam. My division base camp was Chu Lai. My camp was just north of Chu Lai from my battalion. I rarely saw those two places. What I did see were those mountains along the Laotian border. High mountains, thick jungle. This is jungle that is so thick, we refer to it as triple canopy jungle. You look up, you don't see the sun during the day, you don't see the moon or the stars at night. If the canopy opens up in the jungle enough for the sunlight to hit the jungle floor, then the undergrowth gets so thick, you need a machete to cut through it, and your visibility is cut down to a matter of feet in front of you. Combat in areas like this is up close and rather personal. When I got to my unit, because of the extensive training that I had in both map reading and booby traps, I'm assigned my first day in the jungle as point man for the 3rd Platoon, which was walking point for the company. Point man. I got 3 responsibilities as a point man. The first, I'm given a map and a compass, and I'm pointed out what the destination is, what the objective of this unit is for the day. And my job is to lead them there. My second responsibility is to clear out all the booby traps along the way. Vietnam was infested with booby traps. Both the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong used them extremely successfully, obviously to cause casualties, but also to slow our advancement. My job, find that booby trap, disarm that booby trap, so that those behind me can pass safely. My last responsibility, don't lead this element into an ambush. That goes without saying. There's bad people out there looking for you, and your job is to find them. After doing this job the first day, I found out that I kind of liked it. And I voluntarily did that job for the following 6 months. I could have rotated out of that job, but I didn't want to. I enjoyed walking the point. It was an adrenaline rush to me. At the end of 6 months, I rose to the rank of sergeant. And I took over the 3rd Squad of the 3rd Platoon. And my lieutenant comes to me and says, Sarge, find a new point man, because sergeants don't walk point. That's not your job anymore. Your job is to 9 men into combat, not to be the first person down in an ambush. In the area that I worked, if I made contact with the enemy, the first shots fired, not every time, but the majority of the time, was going to either be by the point man or more than likely to be at the point man. I didn't like giving up my job. I enjoyed walking the point. I didn't like having to tell somebody else to do the job that I had done for 6 months. And I lost the first 2 men I assigned that job to. I lost the first one to an ambush. I lost the second guy to a booby trap. Now, both these guys survived their wounds, but neither completed their tour in Vietnam due to the severity of their wounds. They were sent home early. I talk a lot about relationships, the relationships you have with your fellow soldier. I can honestly say I was closer to the 10 guys or 9 guys in my squad than I am my own brother. God knows I love my brother, but I'll never achieve the place in my heart that these 9 guys did. I ate with them, I slept with them, I fought with them, I bled with them. I tried to keep them alive, they tried to keep me alive. There was no secrets among us. We knew everything. We told each other everything that we'd never tell our families back home, our priest or our rabbi. We were brothers. The unfortunate thing is, you're not with these guys for an entire year, because things happen in combat. Out of the original 10 guys that started this journey in January of '68, 9 of us were wounded during our tour. Out of the 9 that were wounded, 2 were amputees. Out of the 9 that were wounded, 4 of us, including myself, were wounded multiple times on multiple occasions. Out of the 9 that were wounded, 7 of those men never completed their tour in Vietnam. Due to the severity of their wounds, they were sent home early, one way or another. And every time I lost one of these guys, I got a replacement troop. We call them NFGs. Stands for New Effing Guy. By the time I made sergeant, my attitude started to change. I really didn't want to know all your little secrets about your life back home. I didn't really want to know you. Because I figured, you know, I'm probably going to lose you just like I lost the guy that you replaced. And that hurt when I lost that guy. And I didn't want to go through that hurt again. And I figured by not knowing you, and I lost you, what the hell? They'll just send me another NFG to replace you. Doesn't work that way though. Why? Because that young soldier kept me alive and I kept him alive. And we ate together and we slept together and we fought together. And sometimes we bled together.
Triple canopy
Yeah.
and your good friends.
If and when you did lose that young soldier, it hurt as bad as the guy that he replaced. Walking Point, I forgot to talk about Walking Point and seeing every living creature that lived in Vietnam. If it walked or crawled or slithered through that jungle, by God, I saw it. Okay? And some of these creatures I really, really didn't like. Top on the list, monkeys. I hate damn monkeys. I really do. Dirty, nasty little critters. No love in my heart for a stinking monkey. And there's a reason for that. You're a point man, you're going through the brush. The monkeys are up in the upper canopy of the jungle. And when you enter their area, they're going to start screaming and yelling and alerting the rest of their clan that you, an intruder, are in their area. Well, the North Vietnamese had ears too. And when they heard the monkeys, they knew I was coming. I hate stinking monkeys. Snakes. God, I hate snakes. I really do. There's nothing I like about snakes. And in Vietnam, we had some of the most poisonous snakes in the world. We had several types of vipers. We had 2 types of cobras. We had king cobras and spitting cobras. And being a point man, you encountered all this wildlife. The only creature I ran into that I really had any fondness for in my entire tour in Vietnam, that's a picture of me 48 years ago with my buddy George on my shoulder. George is a young mongoose. George and I had a special relationship. He ate snakes. I like George. I was told there were bears in Vietnam. You know something? I never saw a damn bear in Vietnam. That's the only creature I never saw. But I can assure you of one thing. In the spring of '68, there were still tigers along the Laotian border. After 9 months of duty, I went on my 1 R&R. Mike didn't tell you.
Yeah.
As an officer, he got a couple of R&Rs. Okay? He tries to tell me rank has its privilege. Yeah. My 1 R&R. I wrote a letter to my fiancée, who I refused to marry before I went to Vietnam, mainly because I didn't want to make her a widow. And I realized shortly after I got there, what the hell's the difference? Is she going to feel any more or any less heartbroken with or without a ring on her finger? So I asked her to meet me in Hawaii on my 9th month of my tour. She met me there, we were married, we had a 4-day honeymoon, and I returned to Vietnam for my final 3 months of my tour. I left Vietnam on the 13th of January, 1969. During my tour in Vietnam, I contracted malaria, dysentery, jungle rot, the proverbial fever of unknown origin. I was wounded twice in Vietnam. Thus, I have 2 Purple Hearts. I received 2 Bronze Stars for my actions in the field in Vietnam. I was shot down in 3 helicopters in Vietnam, 2 Hueys and 1 Chinook, and none of my Purple Hearts are from those shoot downs. I walked away from all 3 crashes. When I got home, I had a 30-day leave. I can look back at it today. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was a different person during those 30 days. I was a different person than I was the year before I left. I was extremely aggressive. I was short-tempered. And I wasn't a happy person. Oh, when I was with my wife and my family, I was happy, sure. But basically, there was a slight bit of depression in my life that I didn't feel before I went. The Army sent me up to Fort Lewis, Washington, and there I trained troops. I trained troops to do the job that I had left in Vietnam. And at the end of my tour of duty, which was August of '69, I was dismissed from the military. My tour was up. My military obligation was done, and I became a civilian once again. We talk about Agent Orange, and we talk about PTSD. Some classes I talk about what I did when I came home. When I first got home, I decided to go back to school. I decided to go to college again. You see, I graduated high school in '65, and I went directly into college, and I lasted about 5 months in college. I lasted from September to December. Unfortunately, I majored in fast cars, pretty girls, and beer. You know, wasn't a great major in college. You know, it was a lot of fun, but you didn't get very good grades, so I got my butt thrown out of college. 4 years later, I realized I'm going nowhere without an education, so I want to get back into college. And I go back to the exact same college I roll into it that I was dropped out of or thrown out of 4 years earlier. But it wasn't the same college. You have to understand, this is 1969. Yeah. When I got to that college, there was a lot of dissent. There was a lot of demonstrations. They didn't like that war. They sure the hell weren't going to fight in that war. And they didn't like any veterans that did. So when you got on campus, you didn't turn around and let them know that you were a veteran. You tried to keep it quiet. I'm not there to cause trouble. I'm there to get an education. You know, give me my grades and let me out of here. But unfortunately, the student body realized that I was ex-military. Why? Because I had extremely short hair at the time. I did have a mustache, but not quite what I have on my face today. You have to understand, I stood out like a sore thumb. This is 1969. The average student body, well, the average student body of the colleges at that time, they all looked like refugees in the stage play Jesus Christ Superstar. Okay. Long hair, beards. I got a military cut. I'm sticking out like a sore thumb. Either I'm a vet or I'm a narc. And either way, they don't want any part of me. I didn't make it in college a second time around either. Okay. I failed the attitude test. You get back into that word aggression and anger. Okay. I didn't make it. So I ended up dropping out. Actually, I was asked to leave again. I took an apprenticeship, became an electrician. I worked as an electrician, Local 6 in San Francisco, until my retirement in 2002. Let's see, PTSD and Agent Orange. I want to talk about that because I want to leave a lot of time for questions and answers. I suffer from PTSD. Okay. Mike suffers from PTSD. I was diagnosed with it in 2002. And it wasn't like it was something I came down with like catching a cold on a BART. I had suffered from PTSD since 1968. The severity of it changed according to what was happening in my life. If I lost a loved one, a family member, a dear friend, if I lost a parent, the symptoms got a hell of a lot stronger. Finally, in 2002, I was asked by my friends to go down and seek help for this. 2002 was a pivotal time in my life, mainly because Mom passed in 2001, late 2001. 9/11 hit in late 2001. We invaded Afghanistan in 2001. We went into Iraq in 2002. And all those ugly crap was building right back up in me again, and I needed help. I ended up going to the VA, and they ended up giving me a very high disability rating for post-traumatic stress disorder. They gave me a shrink. They gave me some nasty pills that I quit taking real quick. They gave me a counselor. I went through private counseling, one-on-one counseling. I went through group counseling. They even sent me to anger management, which my brother thought was a hell of a good idea, and he appreciated it. Did all this cure me? No. I still suffer from PTSD, and I still suffer all the basic symptoms of PTSD. But they taught me how to live with it. They taught me what physical changes in my body actually happened, where your brain actually changes from the chemicals that the hormones and the adrenaline rushes cause through your system. Your brain actually changed. One of the things the VA gave me, the counselor did, he gave me a book that was called Achilles in Vietnam. Wanted me and my wife to both read this. Basically, the book was about ancient Greek warriors and how they suffered the same disability that the Vietnam vets suffered. It's called post-traumatic stress. Well, there's a hell of a lot of wars between those ancient Greeks and today. And in our own nation's short history, God, the Civil War was referred to as soldier's heart, or plain old insanity. World War I, they called it shell shock. World War II, they called it battle fatigue. Mike and I first came home from Vietnam, they called it delayed stress syndrome. They always had a name for this crap, but they never recognized it as a treatable disorder until the late 80s. If you went to the VA and complained about symptoms of PTSD in the 70s, they'd tell you to suck it up. Your grandfather went through it, your father went through it, you're going through it. It's no big deal. Agent Orange. Agent Orange is a herbicide that was used in Vietnam. You guys know what Roundup is? You folks use it in the gardens, right? Spray it on weeds, you kill weeds. You can buy it at any hardware store or any nursery. This is Roundup on steroids. You spray it on jungles and you kill the whole damn jungle. Short time after that jungle sprayed, that's what it looks like. There's nothing green left in that jungle. It's a pile of dead sticks. The wildlife's gone. There's not even a stinking monkey left up in the tree. Him I don't miss. But the rest of that jungle has been destroyed. Why did we do this? We did this for military reasons only. Where are you going to hide 500 North Vietnamese soldiers in a pile of sticks? You've taken that canopy of that jungle away from them. You no longer have to send a grunt into that bush to root out the enemy. Now you can fly right over the top of it and you can spot the enemy's locations. That's why we did it. There's a byproduct of Agent Orange that they didn't realize at the time. It's a dioxin that got into the water system of Vietnam. During my tour, I probably took 5 showers in 1 year in Vietnam. I'm a guy. I spent my time in the bush. There's no bathrooms and showers in the bush. But I bathed in Vietnam. That's my squad, Saturday night in Vietnam. One squad would stand guard. That's a small stream that flows out of the mountains along the Laotian border. My squad would get in, bathe, clean up, then we'd stand guard and let the next squad take their turn. Some of that water had the dioxin of Agent Orange in it. I bathed in it, I waded in it, I drank it. But I'm a grunt, most genuinely. I shared that water. Mike, 60 miles away, maybe 90, down in Da Nang. The same water in that creek eventually flowed down to Mike, and he drank that same water that had the dioxin of Agent Orange in it. He drank that same water that I waded in. He drank that same water that I bathed in. Matter of fact, he drank that same water that I redeposited into the river with. And I remind Mike about that every time he tells me about his second R&R.
I drank the water with scotch, though.
Grunts didn't have scotch in the field. If you drank the water, you're exposed to Agent Orange. If you're exposed to Agent Orange, here's a list of ailments you can come down with. I have 175 men and women in my veterans group. Over 50% of them suffer from something that is on that list. I didn't go to college. I can't pronounce half that correct. But my men suffer from it. And Mike suffers from it. And I suffer from it. I thank you for listening to us. And we've got a lot.
No.
Oh,
We got one more story.
which one?
Mike, your best friend. Your best friend.
Mikey Joyner. Thank you. First class of the year. And I try to bring Mike to every class, and I've got time to bring Mikey to the class. Mikey and I went to high school together. Mikey and I indulged in fast cars, pretty girls, and beer a whole lot. He was a close friend. We got drafted on the same day, went through basic training together. Mike decides to marry Donna, his high school sweetheart, before he goes to Vietnam. He asked me to be in his wedding, and I told him I'm honored. I'll be there. Mike marries Donna. Mike goes to the 196th Light Infantry. I went to the 198th, although we served in the same area, out of the same division. Mike was fortunate. He never got wounded in Nam, but he did suffer terribly when he got home from post-traumatic stress disorder. He tried going to college like I did, and he too failed the attitude test. Mike ended up like I did, going into the trades. We built high-rises together in downtown San Francisco through the 70s and the 80s and into the 90s. You know, we both had wives, we both had a couple of kids, both had a house, both had a mortgage. The only way Mike and I really differed from each other was Mike and his wife loved to play golf. And it's the stupidest damn game I've ever seen in my life. But Mikey loved it. And he loved playing it with his wife, Donna. And his idea of retirement was, get these two girls educated, get them the hell out of the house, get them down that road of life, right? And sell that house and go buy a house on a golf course. And spend the rest of his days hitting that stupid little ball with that stupid little stick. Mike never got his dream, never got his wish, never made it to retirement. August 2002, Mikey succumbed to Agent Orange poisoning. I just visited Washington, D.C. for the first time, and I saw the wall for the first time. And it's taken me this long to get there because of the names that I know on that wall. I really didn't want to see them at first. Well, my buddy Mikey's not on that wall. But sure as I'm talking to you, Dom killed Mikey. It just took 35 years to do it. Thank you.
Bill, one more story.
Yeah.
The window box and how you got it from your kids.
Right there.
Okay. When I came back from Nam, I quit. I stopped talking about Vietnam. Okay. It wasn't a popular war. And you know, inevitably, you get into a discussion on Vietnam, and somebody would turn around and try to tell you how they thought the war should have been fought, or you know, their opinions of the war, or what, you know, and it just angered me. It really did. They tried to tell me about the war, and I'd tell them, how long did you spend in Vietnam? Don't tell me about Vietnam. Okay? So I put Vietnam in the back of my head. I found out it was a lot better to just shut your mouth and don't talk about it, because inevitably I'd get in an argument. So time goes on, and my wife gives me two wonderful children, and my son, who's the youngest of the two, one day, he's going to the closet and he finds the keepsake box. You all know what that is. That's where old people like me hide our memories. Marty finds the keepsake box and he asks his mom, what's all this stuff in the box? She says, well, that's your father's stuff when he was in the Army. And the first thing my son said was, Daddy was a soldier. He had no idea. We didn't talk about it in the house. Okay, it was a taboo subject. His mother, Peggy, tells him, you know, in her great wisdom, she says, why don't you talk to Pop when he gets home tonight? Maybe he'll tell you about when he was a soldier. I walked through the front door that night, and the kid's sitting on the couch, his little arms are folded, and we're talking about 6 years old. And he's got this look in his face, and in front of him, on the coffee table, is all the stuff in the window box. And he points his finger at me when I come through the door, and he goes, we gotta talk. And I go, where the hell did you get this attitude at? Obviously from your Irish mother. The kids asked me some tough questions, both of them did. You know, and my daughter hit me with the toughest question of all. She's about 3 years older than Marty, and she said, is the reason you never told us about it is because you're ashamed? And I said, oh no, I'm extremely proud of my time in the military. I'm extremely proud I served my country. And if I was asked to do it again, I'd do it again in a heartbeat without hesitation. Are there things I'd like to change? Who wouldn't? But I'd never give up those 2 years. The kids bought me the window box, and they asked me to take the awards I received in the service of our country, put them in a box. Hang the box in your favorite room in the house, my daughter says. So that every day you walk by it, you're going to see it, and you can be proud of what you did in the service of your country. So when I started talking to the schools, my daughter asked me, and she was much older then, she goes, well, did you bring the box? And I said, nah. She goes, are you ashamed of it? So there's the box. And when it's not there here in the schools, it's hanging in my bar at home. Have I left anything out? Now it's your turn. If you guys have any questions, Mike and I would love to answer them. We will answer them to the best of our ability. If we don't know the answer, we'll tell you we don't know the answer. Please, we are a non-political group. No political questions unless it's about that era. Your turn, go for it.
We talked about your Bronze Star of Valor.
Yeah, I got one. Got a couple. Yeah. I don't talk about it. Okay. I did my job, nothing more. Questions?
So you returned in 2001 to Vietnam? But you returned to Vietnam. No, you didn't return.
No, neither one of us have gone back. Our organization has
your
gone back
organization. Okay.
twice.
Mm-hmm.
One of the projects that we do is we work in conjunction with the Wheelchair Foundation.
Yeah.
And we've been back twice delivering almost, 4 containers full of wheelchairs.
It's specific for the people who are involved.
Well,
Do the
yes and no.
amputees
The Vietnamese government confiscated half of them and allowed us to distribute the other half. And our group distributed them from, started in Saigon or Ho Chi Minh City and went all the way up to Hanoi and hitting hospitals and orphanages along the way.
Yes, sir.
In Vietnam, you guys had telephones. What did you guys have to do if your squad was attacked and you had the telephone?
No telephones.
There was no telephones at the time?
No. Cell phones didn't exist
I
back
was
then.
just talking about communication.
Communication?
How do you guys communicate with one another?
I get it.
You got it? Well, that's one form of communication. Let's see if I can find that.
Wrote letters home. Okay. And you guys had different kind of food than we had. Okay. All my food came in a cardboard box called sea rations. And that's the size of the box. That's an entire meal is inside this box. Okay? And you guys in here could probably sit and eat 2 of these without hesitation. Okay? And it came in cans, like dog food comes in cans. Okay? This one was called beefsteak. Where the hell was the beef? The can of ham would have such a coating of fat and jelly on the top of it when you opened it. And sometimes it was actually green in color. And I learned to eat this food very happily because a couple times I was in the rear, I had to eat Army Cook's food, and it was not near as good as the stuff that came in these boxes. When I would write a letter home, I found out real fast in the bush that stationery didn't last. Okay? Where I was at along the Laotian border, it was extremely humid, obviously, but it was also extremely wet. It takes a lot of rain to keep that jungle green. Everything in your pack was soaking wet. You were soaking wet. I don't think I was dry the entire year I was in Vietnam. The humidity there, you stand perfectly still and you're sweating out, top, head to toe. So envelopes would seal themselves and stationery would fall apart unless you had a plastic bag. And they hadn't invented Ziploc bags yet. The only guy that had a plastic bag was our RTO, because the batteries for the radio came in a plastic bag. And he was stingy with them. Okay? So the old guys in the squad would take the young guys and teach them how to take that cardboard box that you ate that meal out of and cut it open and write a letter home on it. Okay? And this is an actual letter that I sent my wife, and she was my fiance at the time. And she keeps every one of these. It took an act of Congress for me to get 2 of them to bring to schools and show them. You'd fold that cardboard up, and it'd end up looking like this, and it was this solid. Choppers would come in and resupply us in the bush. Sometimes I was in the bush as long as 28 days before I came out of that jungle. But choppers would come in and resupply us. One guy in my squad would gather up all the mail and run to the door gunner and hand it to him. Door gunners kept a sack right behind them, and they would throw their mail, or our mail, into that sack. Okay? So this is what it looked like when I mailed. Please don't open it up when you pass it around. It's old, it's fragile.
Talking about the RTO there.
Yeah, with that great big whip sticking up there. RTO used to come running up to me, and I used to look at him and go, "Get the hell away from me, man. You are a magnet for bullets." Yeah, I didn't like being around RTOs. Questions?
In answer to your question, that's the kind of communication they had in the field.
Oh, wow.
They had radios like that with the big antennas. Sometimes
PRC 25 was our radios. I don't know if they still use those anymore. Fondly referred to as prick 25s. They weigh about 25 pounds.
Sometimes they had to be powered up, just to
No,
show you a picture of that.
Strictly battery.
Okay,
That
next
was our
question.
communication.
I wouldn't want to be that guy.
Did you all see the box?
Everybody see the box?
Oh, here we go.
Yeah. Mike's got it. Got another question?
They still call them bricks.
They still do.
Not the same radio, it's new and all.
How much gear did you carry on a mission?
From the steel pot to the boots on your feet, about 100 pounds. Okay, I think today's deployment carries a lot more weight than I carried at that time. But we carried about 100 pounds. Okay. And the only personal equipment you really had was a pen. Okay. Everything you had, you needed. Cigarettes, okay. Cigars, chewing tobacco, or any other way I could get nicotine in my body. pretty much weaponry, it mattered not. We carried enough food to last us 3 days in case we couldn't get resupplied. Carried all the ammo you wanted to carry. And I don't think I ever carried too much. M16s I would carry, a Claymore bag full of clips, M16s. Or, yeah, M16s. I carried approximately 4 grenades, carried 2 smoke grenades, carried a Claymore mine. One guy in my squad would carry a Starlight scope. Boy, that's ancient, caveman stuff. You guys had nice little flip-down goggles that you can see in the dark. We carried a 20-some-odd pound Starlight scope. Worked the same way. You can see in the dark with it, but it's just a big, bulky thing. Questions?
Did you guys do a lot of helicopter operations?
Helicopter I used for my insertions in, taken out. I think of one time that I actually walked out of the base camp onto a patrol, other than, a long patrol, for ambushes and stuff like that, that's one thing. But for going out on a 20, 30-day patrol, I never walked out. Choppers, my base camp, first of all, was close to Highway 1, which was on the far east side of Vietnam, and my AO area of operation was along the Laotian border, so there's a lot of miles in between. Towards the end of my tour, they were pulling us out of the jungle and putting us down in the flat grounds in the rice paddy areas. Vietnam's a lot like California as far as geographically. The west side's kind of flat, and the east side you start going up into the mountains. This is up in the northern section of South Vietnam. So you've got, the flat grounds, and then you've got the Sierras in California, and it's pretty much the same way in Vietnam, up in the northern section.
Were there drugs in Vietnam?
Damn good drugs.
A lot of drugs in Vietnam, especially in the later years. When I was there, Bill was there, left in early '69. Remember, I arrived in the middle of '69. 1968 was what? The age of Aquarius. Everything was going on here in the States. That means that the troops that were coming over there, the young people that were coming over there, were coming from an age of drug culture at home. The kids at home, and I don't think we've talked about this, but for every 10 people in Vietnam, 8 of those folks were in support of the guys like Bill that were out in the jungle, supporting them. The guys in the rear area had a tendency to get into more trouble than the guys out in the bush. I, in fact, still to this day do not understand why somebody would smoke on the job. And I'm not talking about cigarettes. I had one young man who was very industrious. He started his own business. Did very well for himself till he got caught. Then he got charged, put on trial, and sent to a federal penitentiary. And then the other young man who was going to come home. Remember the picture of that Mike boat I showed you? The thing with the ramp in the front? Well, one guy got, as Bill says, stoned to the bejesus. And he was telling all of his buddies, hey, I'm going home to San Francisco. And he went and stole one of those Mike boats. He didn't get the ramp all the way up. But he got it started. He was going down the river. The Mike boat was taking on water. Lucky for him, he passed out, and the shore patrol was able to get on board, secure the boat, save him, save the boat. He too ended up doing federal penitentiary time. You just don't do that kind of stuff, you know. Bill, tell them about the drugs in your area, and then we're close to wrapping up.
Well, with the drugs in Vietnam, oh hell yeah, it was a regular candy store. Anything I wanted, I could have got. And you know, honest to God, nobody in my squad used drugs. I'm not saying we didn't drink whiskey and beer, but we did not use drugs. Nobody smoked dope. And there's a reason for that. Right? We policed it amongst ourselves. I'm not going to put my life in the hands of somebody that's stoned to the bejesus out in the bush. The objective of war is to defeat the enemy, and how do you do that? You find his weaknesses. You capitalize upon those weaknesses, and you can defeat an enemy. There's no greater weakness in this world than drugs. And I don't care if it's a legal drug or an illegal drug. I don't care if you drink it, smoke it, snort it, inject it, or how you get it into your fat little bodies. It's a drug. Your body's the temple of your spirit. You only got one. You best take care of it.
Bill mentioned earlier that he suffers and been diagnosed with PTSD. I have as well. Each of us have had our own issues. We've gone through, as Bill said, all different kinds of therapy. The last few times we've talked to therapists and the people that run those kind of programs for the VA, is they say, Mike, you and Bill are very, very unique because you get up and talk to people about your experiences. And in fact, what they've indicated is that that, in fact, is a form of therapy for us to be able to do that. And I mean, I know Bill's had an issue where I've had to go up and get him. Bill's come and grabbed me and dragged me down to sit me down because I froze up right in the middle of a speech. It happens every once in a while. But on behalf of myself, Bill, our organization, the Vietnam Veterans of Diablo Valley, we want to thank all of you because whether you realize it or not, you guys have been our therapists for the last hour and 15 minutes. So we want to thank you. You guys have a safe summer. And all that.
Summer?
What is it?
We got a little ways to go before summer.
Spring, whatever.
So they legalize that stuff.
That's part of that other disease I have, CRS. I need to figure that one out later. All right, thank you.
Okay, if you didn't turn in your quiz, you can give